My aunt and her youngest son, who everyone in the family treats like he can do no wrong, visit us fairly often, and they usually end up spending the night. When they're here, it somehow becomes our responsibility to make sure everything meets their standards. If they decide they'd prefer one of our beds, we give it up. We're expected to accommodate every request, and saying no simply isn't an option. On one particular visit, they completely wrecked the guest room, clothes tossed all over the place like it was a laundry heap. They walked through the house eating constantly, dropping crumbs and spilling things as they went. And even though we never wear shoes indoors, they insisted on keeping theirs on, dragging mud through every clean hallway and carpet. By the time they finally announced they were ready to head out, I was beyond relieved, but they refused to take the bus back, calling it too inconvenient, so my parents had to drive them home, a round trip of nearly 5 hours. While they were gone, I was left in charge of cleaning, including vacuuming and scrubbing the bathrooms. I walked into the bathroom they had been using and just stood there for a moment, trying to process the mess. Shoe prints covered the floor because they had let the sink overflow and then walked right through the puddles without a second thought. The towels were filthy. It honestly seemed like instead of actually bathing, they just wiped themselves down with the towels. My cousin has a reputation for going days without showering, even after running around and working up a sweat, but none of that compared to what I found next. We keep a lidded trash can in every bathroom. My cousin had urinated right onto the lid, which is slightly concave, so it had filled up and just sat there, completely untouched. The smell was unbearable. I ended up kneeling on the floor, tears streaming down my face, having to clean it all up, knowing full well he'd done it deliberately just to be cruel. My cousin has always had a huge appetite. People in the family brush it off with the usual. Teenage boys just eat a lot. They're still growing. But that's not really what's going on. He doesn't just eat because he's hungry. He'll deliberately take everything if he knows someone else was planning to eat it, just so they can't. There's no one specific story here. It's been a pattern for years, a bunch of moments that really added up. One year on my birthday, my extended family came to visit, and my grandmother made a batch of sweets I love. I had to work that day, and by the time I got home, he'd eaten every single one of my favorites. He deliberately left the ones I won't touch just so he could enjoy them later without competition, but only after scarfing down over 60 pieces of candy just to keep me from having a single bite of the good ones. The next day, my grandmother made another batch to make up for it. As soon as she placed the tray down, he stood right beside it and began shoveling food into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days, one hand cramming sweets in while the other was already grabbing more. In no time, the ones I liked were all gone again, and the rest were left untouched. When we go out anywhere with my aunt and cousin, it's always silently expected that we'll cover the bill. My cousin takes full advantage of this. He'll order the most expensive thing on the menu, load his plate with ridiculous portions, and then push it all aside, claiming he didn't like it. After that, he'll ask to go to another restaurant and expect a second full meal. On us. When it's just my side of the family, we usually go for simple fast food. Something quick and cheap like a single meal from McDonald's. Meanwhile, I've seen him demand and receive 2 or 3 full meals, sometimes from different higher-end places. Whenever we're out alone and I won't pay for his food, he threatens to call my grandmother and tell her I didn't feed him. Even though we're both adults now, I'm 25 and he's 21, she still reacts like he's a helpless child. I get accused of letting him go hungry, and suddenly it's my responsibility to buy him whatever he wants. If I don't have enough money for both of us, I end up skipping my own meal. His mom, my aunt, fully supports this kind of behavior. She's pulled the same thing on me whenever my mother isn't around. One time we were about to get donuts, a bit of a luxury where I live, not something cheap, and I said I'd pay for 1 donut per person. My aunt asked for 6 mini donuts instead, which cost nearly the same as 2 regular ones. I reminded her of the 1 per person offer, but she started raising her voice and insisting I buy what she wanted. So I did. I paid for her 6 mini donuts, his 2 full-sized ones, and didn't get anything for myself. I was left with no money for meals for the rest of the week. And when the roles are reversed, when they're buying something for themselves, I'm never included. If I'm not footing their bill, I'm at least expected to cover my own. As you might have gathered by now, my aunt, grandmother, and cousin all seem to think I exist solely to cover their expenses. My aunt has never managed to hold on to a job for more than a few months. My grandmother lives on a modest government pension, and my cousin, well, he's never really done anything productive with his time. At 21, he finally enrolled in our country's naval forces at the very first rung on the ladder as a trainee sailor after nearly failing the basic qualifying exam. And just like that, the family started treating him like he was some kind of genius war hero for being brave, brilliant, and strong enough to serve. He was stationed across the country and enrolled in a year-long training program before he'd officially become part of the Navy. Meanwhile, my job in engineering has me traveling frequently between different plants across the region. So this past June, when I had to visit a plant not too far from where he was based, I figured I'd ask if he wanted to meet up. To be clear, I'm not trying to punish myself. Over time, I've put distance between myself and both my aunt and grandmother, and I rarely talk to them now. And honestly, my cousin isn't so bad when it's just the two of us and I'm free to set boundaries. It's only when his cheerleaders are around that he turns unbearable. A few days pass, and while I'm in the middle of pulling long 10-hour shifts at the plant, I suddenly get a message from him saying he's coming over to see me that day. No warning, no planning, just a surprise visit. I send him the hotel address and tell him I'll meet him there at 6:45 p.m. when I'm done. When I get back, he's waiting out front with a duffel bag. I don't think much of it. After all, I travel with a backpack myself. We go grab some pizza, and since his birthday had been a few days earlier and I could expense my share of the meal anyway, I covered the bill. He didn't even reach for his wallet. I genuinely couldn't tell if he even brought one. Back at the hotel, I open the door and he heads straight for the bathroom to take a shower. Okay? Strange, but not the end of the world. Then he steps out wearing pajamas. Oh, absolutely not. Now, if he ended up staying the night, I'd be the one footing the bill. And while my company treats us well and books us in some pretty nice hotels, my paycheck doesn't stretch far enough to cover an extra room out of pocket, so that was absolutely off the table. Right around then, my aunt starts blowing up my phone. When I finally pick up and explain that her son isn't staying over, she immediately launches into a rant, accusing me of tossing him out, asking, "Why can't you just pay for him? What's your problem?" I calmly told her that if he wanted to stay, he was more than welcome to, provided he paid for his own room. I even threw out a wild number, something like $600, just to discourage her. But she was still fuming, insisting that it should be me covering the cost. After half an hour of going in circles, I finally said I wasn't about to jeopardize my job over this, and that if he wanted to get home, he'd need to call a cab. Eventually, we got off the phone and I actually hung out with my cousin for a while. It was surprisingly pleasant. But once it got late, I reminded him he needed to head out and suggested he call for a ride. Cousin: "But calling a cab costs money." Me: "Yes, that's generally how it works." Cousin: "Let me just use your credit card then." "I don't have one." Me: "Absolutely not. I'm not handing you my credit card info. Don't you have any money?" Cousin, after a few painfully bad attempts to lie: "Yeah." Me: "Then pay for it yourself. I'll order you an Uber and set it to cash." Cousin: "If I'm paying, then I'm staying longer." Me: "The longer you stay, the more the cab's going to cost when it gets late." That shut him down immediately. He got into the car without another word, thank goodness. And me? I gave in a little. I'd felt a bit nostalgic after seeing him for the first time in a while, so I ended up transferring him enough money to cover the Uber. It was just enough to calm my aunt down and stop the barrage of calls to me and my parents, but apparently that still wasn't good enough. My cousin hasn't spoken to me since June. I guess he's still bitter that I wouldn't let him stay at the hotel for free. But just because I have a stable job doesn't mean I'm out here funding his lifestyle. That was the last I heard from any of them. I moved back in January, and since I won't buy them plane tickets, there's not much chance they'll ever come visit. After the hotel incident, both my aunt and cousin stopped talking to me, and honestly, I consider that a win. There's no dramatic ending here, just a tangled family situation and years of wondering how these people manage to get by in the real world. My aunt and grandmother still laugh and call me foolish for actually paying for my own expenses instead of making someone else do it, but at least I have my dignity. And frankly, a pretty good life too. I knew right away that if he stayed overnight, I'd be stuck covering the cost. And sure, my company treats us to some pretty comfortable hotels when we travel. But my own paycheck doesn't stretch far enough to casually pay for an extra room, so that option was off the table. Right on cue, my aunt starts calling repeatedly. When I finally answer and tell her he can't stay, she completely loses it, starts yelling that I'm heartless for kicking out her boy, and demanding to know why I won't just pay for him. I told her he was absolutely welcome to stay if he could cover his own room. I tossed out a ridiculous number, something like $600, hoping it would scare her off. She just kept going, insisting I should be the one to pay. After half an hour of back and forth, I told her point blank that I wasn't about to risk my job over this. If he wanted to get back to base, he needed to call a cab. After the call finally ended, we actually had a nice time hanging out for a couple hours. But once the evening started winding down, I told him it was time to order a ride. He looked at me and said, "But calling a cab costs money." I replied, "Yes, that's how it works." And then he goes, "Let me use your credit card." I don't have one. I just stared at him. There's no way I'm giving you my credit card number. Don't you have cash? He hesitated, tried to bluff something for a few minutes, then admitted, "Yeah, I do." Great. Then you can pay for it. I'll call the Uber and set it to cash. Then he tried to negotiate. If I'm paying, I'm staying longer. I told him the longer he waited, the more expensive the ride would get. That shut the conversation down pretty quickly. He grabbed his bag and got in the car. I'll admit it, I caved a little. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and for a few hours it almost felt like we were just cousins catching up. So after he left, I sent him enough money to cover the ride. It was probably a mistake, but it kept the peace. My aunt stopped calling, and for once, my phone stayed quiet for a few days. But still, that didn't seem to be enough. Since that night, I haven't heard a single word from him. Not a message, not a call. Nothing. I guess he's still upset that I didn't let him crash in a hotel room I couldn't afford to give him. But just because I have a decent job doesn't mean I exist to fund his choices. I moved earlier this year, back in January, and since I won't send them plane tickets, I doubt they'll be showing up at my door anytime soon. After the hotel mess, both my aunt and cousin stopped speaking to me, and honestly, that's a relief. No dramatic fallout, no big goodbye. Just a dysfunctional family I've slowly stepped away from. They still mock me for paying my own way and not expecting handouts. But I'm fine with that. I've got a peaceful life now, and self-respect, which they've never understood. In their world, I'm apparently the designated wallet. My aunt never manages to hold down steady work. My grandmother survives on a modest pension, and my cousin floated through life doing absolutely nothing until recently. Now that he's finally signed up for the naval training program, barely passing the entry exam, I should add, suddenly he's their golden hero. He joined at the lowest level possible, still in training for nearly a year, but the way they talk about him, you'd think he was leading a fleet. Because of my job in engineering, I travel often between regional plants. This June, I had to visit one that happened to be within driving distance of where he was stationed. I figured, why not see if he wanted to meet up? It had been a while, and when he's not under his mother's thumb, he can actually be all right to be around. I wasn't being overly generous either, just curious. We'd barely spoken in recent months, but he said sure. I left it at that and went back to focusing on my project. A few days later, right in the middle of a 10-hour shift, I get a message from him. "I'm coming to see you." No heads up, no asking if it was a good time. Just showing up. I sent him my hotel address and told him to meet me at 6:45 that evening. When I arrived, there he was, waiting out front with a duffel bag. I didn't think much of it. I carry a bag too when I travel. We grabbed some food since it had been his birthday recently, and I didn't mind covering the meal. I could write off my part anyway, and he didn't seem to have brought any money. I don't even know if he had a wallet on him, After dinner, we went back to the hotel. As soon as I opened the door, he walked in like he owned the place and went straight into the bathroom to shower. That raised a red flag, but I tried not to jump to conclusions. Then he stepped out of the bathroom wearing pajamas. That's when it hit me. He wasn't visiting for a few hours. He had shown up planning to spend the night, and he hadn't told me, hadn't asked. Just assumed I'd cover it like always. The moment I saw those pajamas, everything clicked. He had no intention of heading back that night. He'd just assumed I'd let him crash there, and worse, that I'd be the one paying for it. But I couldn't afford that. My employer might put us up in nice hotels, but they're not covering guest stays, and I definitely wasn't about to drop that kind of money on my cousin's uninvited sleepover. Right on cue, my aunt starts calling over and over again. The second I answer and tell her he's not staying, she explodes, full-on shouting, accusing me of abandoning her son, demanding to know why I won't just cover the cost like a normal family member. I told her he was free to stay, if he could pay for the room himself. Then I threw out a ridiculously high number just to end the argument. She was still furious, saying I was being selfish, that I had no heart. After half an hour of that, I said I wasn't risking my job over this and he needed to get a ride home. After that whole ordeal, I've barely heard a word from either of them. My cousin hasn't messaged me once since the trip, and honestly, I'm fine with it. I moved earlier this year, and since I won't be handing out plane tickets, it's unlikely they'll ever show up at my door. It's been quiet, and I'm not complaining. My aunt and grandmother still joke that I'm dumb for paying for my own life instead of asking others to cover it. But I'd rather be called foolish than live the way they do. I may be the one footing my own bills, but I've got peace, independence, and a life that actually feels like mine. There was no big argument, no dramatic confrontation, just silence. They drifted off, and I didn't follow. No more texts from my cousin, no more surprise calls from my aunt, no more guilt trips about money or family duty. It just stopped. Looking back, I don't think they ever really saw me as a person with limits, just someone to lean on when it was convenient. But I've moved forward. I've built a life that doesn't revolve around cleaning up their messes or funding their habits. They might laugh at me for standing on my own, but I sleep well, knowing I earned everything I have. And more than anything, I'm just grateful for the quiet.